Welcome to this session of the LearningPleanet Festival. First of all, thanks to our hosts, the LearningPleanet Institute. This is one among many sessions, as you know, of this, which is becoming really a big venue, most of it online, but not only, a big venue for people from all around the world, passionate, committed to learning and to learning new ways to live in our planet in a sustainable manner. This particular session hosted by the Club of Rome and myself as a vice president of the Club of Rome. My name is Carlos Alvarez Pereira. This session is about the role of research for society. And we want to host this as a dialogue among people from very different places, different ages, different backgrounds, different types of engagements, but most probably, I would say, with a common concern on the future of humanity. And the Club of Rome, maybe many of you don't know so much about it, but we are the global think tank, I would say, specialized in asking better questions. This is what I say about the Club of Rome. When we are good with what we do, we ask better questions, particular questions related to the future of humanity. So some of them are big questions. We have been doing that since 1968, when the club was created, and it adopted a particular perspective or set of perspectives, adopted the intention to look at the issues for the future of humanity from global and local, long-term and short-term, but especially from a systemic perspective, a perspective putting the focus on interdependencies. And if you know about the Club of Rome, you probably know that we became famous 50 years ago when publishing the report The Limits to Growth, which was asking a concrete question, the question of, could prosperity lead to collapse? Could prosperity, in the sense it was understood then and still today, lead to the collapse of human civilizations? And it was built on a rigorous work of simulation, the best of the state of the art at the time about systems modeling and simulation, and the answer was yes, it could. So our addiction to material growth and endless material growth and consumption in a finite planet could lead us to collapse. At the same time, it was saying that we have other options. But in order to go into other options in which human well-being would be balanced with the limits of what we call now the planetary boundaries, that would not happen as a consequence of the business as usual, but as a consequence of learning new ways to be in the planet. And this brings me to this session, because actually what happened is that we did not, as humanity, as a whole of humanity, we did not learn what we know. So the question now, to a large extent, is how do we learn what we already know? And what we already know comes from so many different sources. Part of that from modern science, part of that, if you wish, from the work we did at the Club of Rome 50 years ago, but a big part of it comes from cultures which have been there since the beginning of times and which have developed their own particular wisdom and knowledge about how to be in the world and how to relate among ourselves, with nature, and with time. And this is what this session is about, reflecting together, in particular, on the role of research, science, higher education, if you wish, to produce, to create, to weave, whatever verb you use, the knowledge and transform that into learning. Learning meaning we have not learned until we have changed according to what we know. And this is directly connected, and this is why this session is an invitation by the Club of Rome for you to know about one of the initiatives we are engaged in, the Bridges Coalition for Sustainability Science, a coalition of many partners supported by UNESCO, and we will talk about Bridges later. And happily enough, we have also been able to have among us the chair of the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development, an initiative supported by the United Nations, approved in the United Nations General Assembly. So Michel Spiro, who is the chair of that initiative, will speak also later. This is two good examples of what the Club of Rome is trying to do now, which is to engage with people all across disciplines, continents, as I said, ages, who are committed to find a new way, a new pathway, or new pathways for the necessary knowledge to be transformed into learnings for our reconciliation with ourselves and with the planet, to find out if we are able to produce at last equitable human well-being within a healthy biosphere. To start with, we will have a recorded intervention by the Assistant Director General of UNESCO for Social and Human Sciences, Gabriela Ramos, who is supporting from her position the development of the Bridges Coalition, and I think it's important to have her here with us, to hear what is the perspective of UNESCO about what we are doing. And this will be a pre-recorded intervention, and then we will have a number of panelists, which I will invite to speak and to engage and to have a conversation about this topic. Could you please see the video of Gabriela Ramos? Here she is.
It is my great pleasure, and on behalf of UNESCO, to address the participants of this Club of Rome session on the LearningPleanet Festival. My gratitude to Dr. Carlos Álvarez Pereira, Vice President of the Club of Rome, for this opportunity, but also for his efforts to bring us together. The clock is ticking backward. We have fewer than 8 years to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, but a slow progress and broken promises on so many areas, but particularly on climate change, have left us vulnerable to environmental shocks and pandemics, but also to the cost of this very high inequality that we are experiencing. There are no simple threats. We are facing systemic challenges that are mutually reinforcing each other. The climate transition, the demographic shifts, the digital transformation, and the increased inequalities are bound together in many different forms. Nevertheless, the current political and socioeconomic structures and procedures are still counting on maximizing growth and material well-being in a context of planetary boundaries that have their limits and that were first exposed by the Club of Rome many years ago with their seminal report. So restructuring our socioeconomic system is necessary to tackle both climate change and structural inequality. And for that to happen, bold intellectual innovation that inspires policy rethinking is really required. And there is no other way in which we will reach the fair transitions that the Agenda 2030 calls for. The bad news is that the current situation and problems is the result of the decisions we made and the analytical frameworks we relied on. The good news is that we can change them. The challenge is to create enough evidence and champions to counter vested interest, because somebody is winning with the current situation. And this is a position at the social and human sciences sector at UNESCO, with our program on managing the social transformation that focus on the research policy nexus with the clear content of social outcomes, social inclusion. We have just produced a report on resilient and inclusive societies, underscoring that economic decisions in the past had been overdetermined by considerations to maximize efficiency, productivity, and growth. Environmental and social distributive outcomes were secondary in this framework. And this is why we make a call to integrate equity and sustainability considerations in an ex ante manner in the definitions of economic policies. We do not need to get the problems to solve them. We might as well not create those problems. But we also make a very strong call to bring all sciences on board, particularly those that help us give meaning to the issues and understand better human behavior. Thus, at UNESCO, we are active advocates of the global conversation that is rethinking the growth and development models and the new social contracts that should emerge from the COVID experience. And that's why we are very proud that the Bridges Coalition, of which the Club of Rome is one of the founding partners, is the first ever humanities-driven international sustainability science initiative within UNESCO. Sustainability science responds to the interdependent, complex, and mutually reinforcing character of natural, social, and cultural sustainability challenges that are ongoing globally and locally. It is cross-cutting science by nature, and it seeks to complement cooperation between natural and social sciences, the humanities, the arts, everything that defines human in its broad perspective. And by incorporating the humanities, sustainability science can bring creative stories to make climate change imaginable for people. Humanists are crucial for solving problems based on knowledge that touches upon the issue and establish ethical principles. Thus, this science has a huge role to play in enabling the strategies for action and social transformation. And this broad perspective provides unique insights about encompassing social context and human behavior, beliefs and norms that could shape a more positive relationship with the environment. The extensive scope of the themes that Bridges find in UNESCO is this wide platform to promote potentially transformative collaborations across cultural, historical, philosophical, and aesthetic disciplines, in a good cooperation with social and natural sciences. We are also counting on diverse stakeholders, different points of view, very open-minded, particularly the civil society and indigenous population, which really are knowledge holders that can provide us with some pathways to deal better with the environment. And we bring these voices in initiatives just like the Kogi people in the Sierra Nevada in Santa Marta Mountains in Colombia. I am convinced that innovative policy approaches to deepen the nexus between the environment, the economy, and human well-being requires accelerated integration, not only the science, natural, social, but also humanities. And therefore, we are eager to bring MOST, our program on managing the social transformation, and within MOST, the Bridges Coalition, to this debate with our long-standing partner, the Club of Rome. Let's bring together a new economic model that factor in the planetary boundaries and distributional aspects. We are looking forward to our cooperation, and I wish you all a fruitful and enjoyable event.
So many thanks. I will transmit my gratitude to Gabriela Ramos for her words, which resonate very much with me on one side, because, you know, the Club of Rome has always tried to put itself at the intersection of humanism and science. So not accepting, you know, the traditional division between the two cultures, the humanistic culture and the scientific culture, but thinking that they are both manifestations of the same human genius, and locating ourselves at this intersection where so much can be done. And of course, her words were going very much in that direction, but also because of something else that she mentioned, the importance of not separating the social and the environmental. And a year ago in the Club of Rome, we adopted the slogan for the 50th anniversary of the publication of the Limits to Growth. We adopted the slogan of global equity for a healthy planet, making clear that equity and the health of the planet are not different dimensions. They are deeply, deeply interconnected. And now to warm up the room, because this is about how do we mobilize all our capacities to engage in this huge process of learning new ways of being in the world. I would like to share with you, to present you the trailer of a documentary film. And we are privileged enough to have the filmmaker in the room. She will speak after that. But let's first have the trailer of the documentary Regenerar, which I think you will like. I'm biased. I like it very much. Please go ahead. Technicalities allowing, of course, just a bit of patience.
Será que se mudarmos os modos de pensar, podemos mudar as formas de agir? Porque, mesmo diante do colapso dos sistemas vivos e o risco de extinção, inclusive da espécie humana, o eco das ideias de progresso e desenvolvimento segue criando políticas de extermínio.
I like to think of our times as not just trouble, it's a crisis, everyone put the fire out. It's more like an invitation to slow down, and not just to slow down, but to go deep into the earth.
Então, assim, até que ponto a regeneração ela está para uma revolução, até que ponto ela está para uma reforma?
Em 1972, líderes mundiais se reuniram pela primeira vez em Estocolmo para debater medidas de preservação. E a partir daí, foram várias conferências e acordos. Apesar dessa grande mobilização por tantos anos, não conseguimos evitar a emergência climática que já estamos vivendo.
Why should we study for a future that is being taken away from us?
The earth is speaking. She tells us that we have no more time.
Vamos investigar as relações entre a emergência climática e a modernidade colonial, e como elas se manifestam na morte, no sonho e na vida.
Esse grande mal-estar do século XXI tem tudo a ver com o nosso abandono do sonho e com o assédio permanente do sono pelo sistema capitalista, pelo mundo do trabalho.
Sonhar é uma resistência.
A minha avó, ela dizia que tudo a gente recebe através do sonho.
Como é que a gente constrói cidades menos patriarcais que nos conectem mais?
We're not the center of social change. We're not the center of geological shifts. We are part and parcel of a web that exceeds us. Maybe the way we frame the crisis is part of the crisis.
So let me take that last sentence by your Akomolafe, saying maybe the way we frame the crisis is part of the crisis. Maybe the way we think is part of the crisis. Maybe the way we frame our research and creation of new knowledge is part of the issues we have to face. And to introduce to all of you, the filmmaker, an artist and journalist from Brazil, from Rio de Janeiro, Maria Clara Parente. Hello, Maria Clara. What would you like to share with us?
Hello, everyone. I don't know if the video was a little bumpy. I can send you also the links for you watch after. I don't know if it was my internet, but yeah. Thank you, Carlos, for the introduction. Thank you, Club of Rome and LearningPleanet Festival for this invitation. So the trailer that you just saw is part of the film that I directed recently, which is Regenerar, Possible Paths on a Damaged Planet. And that Ana Denardin, who is also here with us, worked as a designer and art director. So this film is also a research project about systemic crisis with 3 lenses, death, dreams, and life. And I would like to start the session today with a sentence written by biologist and philosopher Donna Haraway from the book Staying with the Trouble. So the sentence goes like this: right now, the earth is full of refugees, human and not, without refuge. So the sentence is part of a chapter where she talks about the issues of naming the times in times of multiple extinctions, like the ones that we are living in. So Anthropocene, Plantationocene, Capitalocene are names that she evokes in that context. So for her, and I definitely agree with her, Anthropocene is more a boundary event than an epoch. And our tasks, in her words, is to make Anthropocene as thin, short as possible, and to create space to cultivate epochs to come, where we can cultivate places and times of refuge. So our question here today: how can research best address the challenges we face today? I feel that research in a time of multiple extinctions should be able to generate refuge. And what does it mean in practice? Like Carlos said, we have many questions and we don't know, but it feels like a times of experimentation and responsibility. So research as a place of creating webs, research as a place for making kin, research as a place for reciprocity, research as a place of joy, research as a place of co-presence, research as a place to mourn the deaths, research as a place to be able to perceive who is not doing research, research as a place to be aware of the unknown, research as a place of radical reform, research as a place of possibility. So my research right now at the university is about the possibility of symbiotic stories of partnership with women artists to generate change. So I'm researching, for example, an artist that is making bioart with fungi partner, and she's guided by the agency of this being. So she's guided by a different timing. And also researching a film that is in a partnership between a white anthropologist and an indigenous filmmaker from Brazil. So the film questioned the idea of anthropology and who makes questions to who. And another thing in research is curiosity, because curiosity has driven violent patterns in research. So how can research completely change this logic? Of course, the university has old patterns, structures to deal with, but I feel that it can still be a place to generate the possibility for the encounters that can be able to create refuge. So coming back to the research on the documentary, I would like to mention one issue that is about dreaming and how can be key for research. So in Yanomami indigenous culture here in Brazil, to know something is only possible when you dream about it. So you can only be learning about something when you learn about it in your dream. And yeah, I just want to mention that I feel that is super interesting to stay with this. And also I would like to finish remembering that now a massive genocide happened with Yanomami people in the last 4 years of far-right government, and there are more than 100 children deaths in the lack of nutrition, in preventable diseases. And the biggest situation, the responsibility is mining for gold. So in this context, I would like to finish with an example of the journalist Eliane Brum, that's been covering Amazon for more than 20 years, and since 2017 moved to Amazon. So her research moved her physically to this place. That is the real center of the earth. And now she created a website that I can send you here the link, where she covers Amazon in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. And there you can learn and donate to the Yanomami people right now. And so I feel that research should be able to generate this kind of movement, bodily movement, and to cultivate refugee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria Clara. Very inspiring words. I noted the multiple definitions, and James Crabb is also saying in the chat. Please, to all attendants, feel free to manifest yourselves in the chat. You know, this is an open discussion, but take note of research to generate refuge in times of polycrisis, and also to generate the place for possibilities, open the space of possibilities. Very inspiring. Now we move to a perspective from a completely different place in the world, from Bangladesh. We have with us Raj Sharar, who is a social and cultural anthropologist, and I'm sure her perspective will also enrich the conversation. Rad, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carlos. Hi, everybody. I'm Rad, and as Carlos said, I'm a social and cultural anthropologist by academic training. Before I begin, I would like to thank the LearningPleanet Festival for this space for us all to convene, and also the British Coalition and the Club of Rome for organizing this amazing seminar. Before I go on to say what I would like to say, I want to clarify my positionality and my context from where I'm coming from when I'm speaking these things. I'll be talking from my background as a social and cultural anthropologist, and as well as a social development professional in Bangladesh, as well as a student trained in anthropology in Bangladesh, which is an institution from the rest of the world, and as well as from a European university, also in anthropology. So anthropology is a discipline that is a direct result of colonialism. So the intention and the ambition and motivation to decolonize it should be even more intentional and fierce. When I was studying anthropology in Bangladesh, we studied local context-specific literature, which grounded us into understanding the culture around which we were already existing. And then in Europe, the reality was very contrary to that, where we were learning about different diverse cultures, but through the lenses of European academia. So there was a big contrast to this, which led me to become very frustrated with how anthropology as a discipline was being portrayed in these institutions, in European institutions. This led me to join a transdisciplinary program in the university, which gave me the opportunity to explore different forms of co-creating and learner-driven education, where education was given into the hands of the learners rather than trickling down from experts and teachers into students. This made me also very much aware of the fact that when I was in Bangladesh as a social development worker, I've worked with an organization called Nijerapuri, which directly translates into "we do it ourselves." And this particular development organization promotes learner-driven approaches to their activities and projects. And this organization focuses on empowerment of landless rural men and women by helping them form independent landless groups and supporting them through awareness raising and capacity building initiatives which enables them to autonomously establish their rights as citizens. They do this in a very community-driven way, where they're making the decisions for themselves. I was very fortunate when I was there. I was a part of a project where we had schoolgirls in very remote local locations in Bangladesh play football in a way to empower themselves. They would play football, and that would have a domino effect on every other right that they realized themselves that they should have, and then disseminated that information to other villages around in this learner-driven approach to social development. What I understand about research is that what I understand about research now is that research has to adapt to learn how to advance a life-supporting, responsible paradigm of natural ecosystems. It must include the co-creation of knowledge that is aligned with how life happens all around us, and create open spaces for transdisciplinary learning, and include very non-academic perspectives, because that is so important. Non-academic learner-driven perspectives exist in the world today, in the rest of the world, which are not being the focus of academic research we see in institutions. And this is the focus that needs to shift towards the non-academic part of how life convenes and continues. So with this, I would like to conclude my intervention, and would like to give the floor back to Carlos.
Thank you, Rad. Thank you so much from that particular example of in your life, in your engagement with that organization in Bangladesh, illuminating this idea of research for life-supporting responsible paradigms and involving non-academic participants. That's a good point. Shouldn't we put upside down the model of research that we have today, you know, and go from the ground? I mean, at least listen from the ground. What are the challenges, and what is the knowledge which is there, which is the traditional knowledge, and then try to weave that with science, with academic research. I would like to invite now to intervene my friend Luis Osterbeck, who has had a very important role in creating the Bridges Coalition, but we will talk about Bridges a bit later. Let me say that Luis is the president of CIPSH, which is the acronym for the International Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences. He comes from humanities himself, is a professor in history and archaeology, to be more precise, in Portugal. And Luis, what do you think about this challenge of reframing research for the role of for society, the role of research for society, especially in the light of the comments that we already heard? Luis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and thank you for the invitation and for setting up this discussion. Let me start by saying I liked the film that we have seen, and I liked, you know, Carlos, we know each other for some time. You know, I completely disagree with the idea that the Anthropocene is a new geological era. I think it's a scientific mistake. Having said this, the concept may be useful, and the definition that was given is actually, I think, very good. If it addresses a moment in history in which we have to reflect on the ways humans relate to the environments and so on. And I think the question about research is actually very important. So I would like to say three things, okay, to keep it as short as possible. The first one is that those who participate in this kind of debates, be it in the university or as leaders of this or whatever, we shouldn't look at ourselves as a sort of avant-garde. This is not the time of avant-garde. This is the time, it's a moment in history in which citizens, individuals, distrust organizations. They became very skeptic about all sorts of organized structures. We are not in the 19th century or even in the 20th century. We are in a different moment. And in this different moment, individuals are moving, they are doing things, and they are reorganizing themselves in a sort of chaotic process, in my understanding, where serendipity plays a very important role. So the first thing would be to get rid of any idea that we can lead whoever, but we can, of course, play our role. We have to take our responsibilities. And one first thing I would say is that transformation already started. Sometimes there is a discussion that there is a need for this or for that, so that we will help setting whatever in terms of organizing the transformation of societies. I think this is a bit naive, sometimes even a bit arrogant. And I don't want to go deep into bridges, but I think bridges precisely builds on a bottom-up approach that recognizes that people in the world, billions actually of people in the world, are already, of course, not only adapting, but changing their ways of behavior. And when we look at those, we see that it is new path. The focus is trying to do something different. There is an understanding that things will be different in the future, not necessarily very clear, but different. A sort of utopia, blurred utopia, that could meet this idea of dream that we saw in the movie, which was also very interesting. Yes, it's dreaming. Dreaming is very important. Thinking that things can be in a way that they have never been in the past. And this is very important. We also see that the solutions, the paths that are performed by different communities are tailor-made. So you will not find the same exact procedures among the Kogi, or in a neighborhood in Mação in Portugal, or in a village in the center of Africa, Ebo, for example, or in Angsu in China, just to mention some that I know of. But they are all moving in the same direction. They are different, but they are all tailor-made. They are all anchored, not in big design of goals, but in a very basic idea. We can't keep on living like this, and we want to find a new way of a balanced equilibrium in which words like ethics and also aesthetics are very important. Words, or to better say, the concepts. The words might not be there, but there is an ethical concern, and there is also an aesthetical concern in all these processes. Now, this would be my first observation. The second observation is about climate. Very briefly, it is interesting that, because 1972 has been mentioned. In 1972, two things were actually mentioned. One was climate and the other one was environment. And if we go to 1992, for example, and the Earth Summit agenda, the core was about environment. The core of Agenda 21 was about ecosystems. And of course, when we talk about ecosystems, we talk about diversity. And those who took the concept of climate since 1971 and led to the COPs were much more the corporations, the big corporations and governments. But the communities and also the governments and NGOs, in the beginning, they took the path of looking at ecosystems and environment. And when you talk to people about environment and ecosystems, they find that they can intervene. They find that they can be proactive. They find there is room to dream precisely. But when you put a single agenda on top of everyone, which is the climate agenda, I'm not saying that there is no climate issue. I'm only saying that The moment you create one single climate agenda for the planet, you reduce communities to the impossibility of making change. I think they are changing anyway. They are transforming anyway, but there is a growing divorce. And I see it as a positive thing, not as a negative one. There is a growing divorce between the agency of human communities all through the world and the climate agenda. I think the climate agenda is growingly a leadership agenda, well-intended. I'm not saying it's not well-intended and so on, but it's naive and it's not working. And the third final observation is about humanities and humanities research. Now, humanities have to be very careful in one thing. There is no reality that we can study only with anthropology or only with history or only with literature or only with any of the humanistic disciplines. There are experts in each of these disciplines, which are angles of attack, angles to study human behavior and human performance. But any of these expertise needs always to work with the others. And one of the problems that university itself created was to reify in the Marxist concept these disciplines. And as it did also with sociology and economy, for example. And none of them can actually work without the others. Once they get into the field isolated, all they can do is to build an ivory tower, which will be disconnected with society. It's not a problem when you are studying as a theoretical researcher on prehistoric societies, for example. The prehistorians, of course, work in an interdisciplinary framework. But what I mean is, it's not a big deal because you need to become an expert, say, in anthropology or literature. But when you are interacting with living societies and want to say something about current societal challenges, I would be very, very careful in saying what we need is whatever in this or that discipline. What I would say is that when we look at communities in transformations, there are four basic pillars we recognize, at least I think we can recognize in any of these cases. The first one is a very strong attention to learning. Learning is core. Learning is core in three dimensions, which we have separated analytically, but they are basically the same thing, which is training, communication, and education. These three things can be put together in a process of learning throughout life, since kids are born until we die. And this is a very important thing. Traditional societies take care of this very well, and contemporary societies that are in a process of consolidated transformations also take care of it in a quite good way. The second thing is the existence of a consolidated social cultural matrix, which is the individual networks of contacts that informally exist in a society, the relations of trust, if you wish. You don't trust institutions, you trust people. And the trust needs to go across generations. We have a big problem here because we have no longer societies of 3 generations, we have societies of 5 and 6 generations. So we need to help whenever we can, as citizens and also as scholars, to reconnect these generations, because without these reconnections, there will be no transfer of knowledge. And without transfer of knowledge across generations, there will be no transformation of knowledge, because every time people will be starting from scratch. And this is, again, when we look at societies in transition today, those who do better are precisely those who have mechanisms of this kind. And then the other two are relatively simple. One is engaging stakeholders, of course, and the other one is communication, a transparent communication in society. So basically, that's what I would say. Humanities, again, bridging with the film when it is mentioned about slowing down. I think what humanities bring into daily life discussions is a sense of mid and long term. which allows to go beyond the anxieties and to reason, to think. And that's it. So I would say research, let's reorganize research without trying to be the saviors of the earth, because often I'm a bit worried that academics would believe that they could save the planet. They cannot. If anyone will save the planet, will be the young people. And God knows how this will be very different from anything we can dream. Okay, that's all for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis, for your words. You probably noticed that we invited many young people, young women, by the way, to this panel. And so what you said, a lot of things that you said resonate very much with the approach we are developing in the Club of Rome to these topics in the program that I lead, which we call the Fifth Element, a program for learning, where all threads of knowledge are relevant, including the ancient ones, and hence the name, the Fifth Element, which is a reference to life in ancient traditions. But yeah, I mean, your comments are very well taken, and particularly that one of not the time for avant-garde. Maybe connecting with what Maria Clara said, that we are becoming, all of us, we're becoming refugees. Maybe the refugees are the avant-garde, you know? And we also have to learn from them. Time for Ana Denardin, also from Brazil, who participated as artistic director in the realization of the documentary Regenerar. She's an architect, graphic designer, and artist. So Ana, what would you like to share with us?
Thank you, Carlos, for the introduction. I want to expand the discussion on what my fellow speakers were already saying, especially pointing one thing that the Regenerar documentary touches upon, that the Anthropocene is also an indicator of our failure to imagine alternative ways of living with the Earth. The fact that we have now the highest number of educated people in history and yet are the closest generation to ecological breakdown is a reminder that we need to shift the way we think about our agency within the world, from learning about it in order to act upon it, to learning to become with the world around us. And very rarely we encounter institutionalized forms of education that, instead of thinking about the production and transmission of knowledge, are thinking also about exploring the relationships we establish with knowledge and with meaning making. And here I think it is valid for me to introduce my research, to contextualize where I'm coming from and share some of my challenges I faced. So my master thesis is around investigating traditional ecological knowledge through working with some indigenous partners here in Brazil as a way to investigate how indigenous ways of knowing and being can offer insights around the decolonial approach to regeneration, biomimicry, systems thinking. My biggest fear in doing that was cultural appropriation on one side, and also the translation that would need to be done to approach indigenous knowledge in an academic work. While Western ways of knowing place a high value on objectivity and the measurable, indigenous ways of knowing value knowledge that is gained through direct personal experience, through storytelling, ritual, dances, and even non-human knowledges, as Maria was saying. So some traditional knowledge may include, for example, the sacred dimensions of the environment, which does not make sense for science. So I started investigating a lot of the colonial and indigenous research methodologies. And even though they help, they don't solve the problem completely. And this is because scientific thinking falls into what Boaventura de Souza Santos calls abyssal thinking. So there is a metaphorical abyss that divides social reality into two realms. Scientific thinking is in this side of the abyss, while popular, peasant, indigenous, and even non-human knowledges are on the other side. and are often made unintelligible by scientific approaches. So in the field of knowledge, absolute thinking consists in granting to modern science the universal distinction between true and false, and knowledges that are on the other side of the line vanish as relevant because they are beyond truth and falsehood. So on the other side of the line, there is no knowledge, there are beliefs, opinions, intuitive or subjective understandings, which at most may become objects of raw materials for scientific inquiry. And as in modern institutions, the knowledges that are on the other side of the abyss are unintelligible, those from that space who want to be heard need to learn to translate their message into the mode of communication that is legible to us. And so much is lost in this translation. So the practices from the other side of the line are also often selectively adopted or instrumentalized by institutions to enact inclusion or as a branding of diversity. But even when including other perspectives, we rarely question our own presumed universalism. Thus, the act of inclusion becomes a means for this side of the line to reclaim universality. Once it excluded difference, now it embraces it, but in its own terms, becoming even more totalizing. So I think for me, what remains unquestioned is the assumption that exclusion from universalism is the problem, and that inclusion and assimilation into this side of the line is the only viable and desirable means of addressing the problem. We don't question how we can also be open to other perspectives and ways of being on their own terms, recognizing that both sides of the abyss are indispensable, but also insufficient alone. And that's why I say that the colonial methodologies help, but they don't solve the problem because they only touch on the methodological realm. And I believe that more than that, we need to do some work also on the epistemological and even ontological realms in order to change and disrupt really, for it to really happen. But with this, I end my reflections. I think I have already consumed my time. Over to you, Carlos.
You might have consumed your time. You have not consumed our attention to what you were saying, Anna. Because I was thinking, fortunately, this session is being recorded, because we'll have to come back to what you said, to what you all said, but especially to what you just said, and to this concept of the abyss and being on both sides of it. So very, very inspiring. Thank you. And now we move to another continent, the mother continent from where we all come from. And I would like to give the floor to Snotile Mkhize. Not sure my pronunciation is good. She's from South Africa, from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, working now in a PhD on, if I understood well, development studies. So what is your perspective, Snotile, from Africa?
Thank you so much for the invitation, and your pronunciation is spot on.
Thank you.
Like you said, my name is Snotile Mkhize. I am a PhD candidate in development studies at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I am also a project coordinator for a program called the Educational Partnership for Innovation in Communities. So what we are focused on, this partnership is based in the university. It's a collaboration between the university and the local municipality. So the main aim of this project is basically research. We look at the research needs of the local community based on research questions which are submitted by the local municipality. So different departments and line functions within the municipality will look at research needs that are community driven at the time, or which communities are in dire need, or whatever departments are looking at. For example, let me use a practical example of the floods that hit Durban in April last year. So those floods were an issue of climate change. So not only did those floods impact the Human Settlements Department, they also impacted waste management and the climate protection unit. So all those line functions within the eThekwini municipalities put in research questions for the university. And we then funnel those research questions to our students. So those students are mainly just postgraduate students, so consisting of honors, masters, and PhD students who then choose those main questions as their dissertation questions, so either their dissertations or their master's theses. So they looked at how the floods impacted the communities. So, like I said, it was the human, if it was the human settlements, if it was the Department of Human Settlements, how the floods impacted the Human Settlements Department, how it impacted sustainable urban drainage system. So then they would reframe how to redesign informal settlements, how to redesign urban drainage systems. So we'll be looking at the Department of Engineering, we'll be looking at the Geography Department, we'll be looking at development studies, and we also will be looking at not only social work students, but also psychology students will be funneled into the community to look at assisting the community members. So it is really important to see how research can be woven into just bringing everyone together. So not only the government, but the university and the community into one synergy of a system that just works together. So for us at EPIC and the University of KwaZulu-Natal, reframing research means research should be practical in a way that is understood by the community and the layman. So research is not about it's just being cited or gathering dust in a library. Research should be practical enough for it to be applied into real life situations. So it should be applied into every discipline, and it should also impact policy as well. So for us, that's what it means to reframe research in society. So we look at research-driven initiatives, which are important in academia for several reasons. So basically, it builds trust and establishes relationship between academic researchers and the community. And it also helps historically marginalized communities which are underserved by academia and the government. And it also builds trust in terms of transferring knowledge and technology from academia to the community, and can also increase the likelihood that the research fundings will be adopted and used by our local communities. So these community-driven research initiatives can also help increase diversity and inclusiveness of academic research. So by actively engaging with community members, so through putting our students into these scenarios where they actively engage with these research questions, they get to engage with community members from diverse backgrounds, and our researchers gain a more holistic understanding of problems and issues faced by different communities, which ensures that the research is more inclusive and equitable. So which means that our initiatives foster a collaboration, like I said, between academia, government, and industry, leading to a more effective and sustainable solutions to real world problems. And one more thing that I can say about the EPIC program at the University of KwaZulu-Natal is that in the different schools or disciplines is that the EPIC program is divided into EPIC focused modules. So for the honors program, we have what we call the special studies module, where we have community members come into the schools to guest lecture different components of the program. So community members will give their real life perspectives of the issue. So we'll have people from informal settlements coming to speak about how the floods impacted them and how they wish to see how policy can be changed and how things can be addressed by the municipality. And we'll also have people from the local municipality coming to tell us about how implementation and policy briefs work. So our students get to engage in mentorship programs and have a full understanding of how the municipality works, of how the research can impact the community as well. What else can I add to this?
Snotile, I think you don't have to add anything else, because I think you made a very good point, a very good case of the kind of research in which you are involved. This idea of
okay, thank you.
Thank you to you. Community-driven research that resonates a lot with what the other panelists have said, and in particular with this idea that Luis expressed. That actually what is happening is that the people are reorganizing themselves and looking in a multiplicity of ways their own responses to the challenge, to the big challenges in which they live. So we will complete this round of panelists interventions with last but not least Stephen Hartman, who comes from yet another discipline, but of course this whole discussion is about going beyond disciplines. He has a PhD in American literature and has been working for a while leading something called Humanities for Environment, and is also one of the co-founding partner of the Bridges Coalition, on which he will speak later. As I said, we will have a introduction to what Bridges is doing. But Stephen, thinking about what you heard now and from your own experience, what would you like to share?
Thanks very much, Carlos. And I want to really thank the Club of Rome for organizing this session. I think it's fantastic. I want to thank the LearningPleanet Festival and the LearningPleanet Institute for creating the space for this. I think these are it's really important conversations that we're having here. And in the interest of sort of staying on track with time, I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, because I have this intervention and I have an intervention where I'm supposed to say a little bit more about Bridges later. What I would like to say to begin with is that it's good to hear about community-driven research and community-driven knowledge production, because I think that's also what Bridges is all about. Bridges is about, part of our branding of Bridges is humanities-driven sustainability science. And that almost seems like an oxymoron, but it's intentional. And we put humanities in there in that way because humanities is one of those areas that has been outside the mainstream of sustainability science, that has been outside the mainstream of the science policy interface. It hasn't had a foothold, and we need to sort of prioritize that. I was very glad to hear Gabriela Ramos in her intervention earlier in this session remark on how Bridges is the first humanities-driven sustainability initiative within UNESCO. It's true, and which means that, you know, within the UN family of organizations, it's really one of those that's sort of very humanities driven. But the thing about Bridges is it's not exclusive to the humanities. Humanities can't just replicate the silos that we know are the problems with knowledge production, knowledge exchange, and the approaches we need to be taking to our great challenges right now. We know that the humanities has to be working together with the social sciences, with the arts, with the natural sciences, and most importantly, with communities, with non-academic knowledge communities, whether they be indigenous knowledge communities or other local knowledge communities. So Bridges is really about connecting up communities of knowledge, communities of practice with actual communities, and in the transdisciplinary co-production of knowledge. I'm just going to riff, I guess you could say, on a couple of the ideas I heard come into this session right now, because I feel that I was really taken by Anna's comments, and I'm not going to summarize them but I will maybe try to build on them a little bit. And I think that in that sense, really, it sort of links up a little bit with what Maria Clara Parente said too about dreaming. I think that's something that really struck a note with a lot of people in this session. And thinking about how that may be connected with the idea of utopia that Luis had put together. I would suggest that utopia is a never receding horizon. You know, utopia is not an actual place because it can never be achieved. That's why whenever you have literature about utopias, they're always really about dystopias. So it's always about when you try to achieve a perfect society, what goes wrong. But the thing is, a utopia is not a place. A utopia is a process towards a better world. And I think utopia is a very powerful and strong motivator for all of us. We all look around and we can see how current structures may or may not be meeting the needs of the world, and what we need to do to revitalize those structures and maybe to reimagine them. So Bridges is all about, I think, not only implementation of the SDGs, not only about transformation, but it's also about disruption insofar as social innovation, let's say, that includes innovating our institutions. And I think this is very critical. Once institutions are built, they become very difficult to change. And they structure the way knowledge is received and the way it's interpreted and the way it's applied in their specific spheres of influence, whether those are great or small, from a kindergarten to the UN. And I think we find examples of exclusionary elements within the institutions that have developed not necessarily by design, but they've developed that way, so that for the longest time, indigenous knowledge systems had no place to come into the science policy interface. The arts and the humanities had no place to come into the science policy interface. Qualitative social sciences had no place to come into the knowledge policy interface, except in certain particulars, in economics and things that sort of broadly fit under social sciences, but really at that end of things, or in certain technical fields. So I think what Bridges is all about is exploring from those micro levels to the macro levels, how we can use our privileged position as being the first humanities-driven, which isn't just humanities, sustainability science coalition, and our position within the MOST program, the opportunity that it gives us to dialogue with ministers in the Intergovernmental Council of MOST, made up of 35 countries, but also to dialogue with colleagues across the domains of the social sciences, the natural sciences, the arts, educational sciences, within UNESCO, within other major sort of organizations outside of the UN family, like the Club of Rome, and find how we can actually be building bridges between different sectors, between different actors, to empower more people and create structures that allow a greater coalescence of knowledge to come and be put into action. So that's what I would say Bridges is all about. And I don't want to use up any more time right now, so I'm going to end there.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Actually, you raised some pretty good points. By the way, I mean, we have 45 minutes left. We will have more or less the last 15 minutes to talk a bit more about bridges and have a short introductions of by the bridges, some of the bridges hubs that we call hubs. Let's take these 30 minutes for to continue this as a conversation, and I would invite the attendants. We have 60 of them to raise their hands, but not their physical hands, but their digital hands in Zoom. I hope you all know how to do that from the menu below your screen, the menu of reactions, to raise your digital hand if you would like to ask something or say something, to interact with the speakers, with the panelists, etc. To me, what I hear from, one of the things I hear from what has been said is this, you know, this coexistence of two worlds in a way. The world of the people who are looking often on their own for new responses on the ground, in communities, often in ways which are bold and not necessarily informed by academic perspectives, and maybe they have good reasons to do that on their own, you know. But people in general, with a significant distrust of the institutions and with the confidence in that the future will be better than the present, well, that looks broken in many places and for many millions of people. And by the way, the Club of Rome organized in early December our annual conference in Costa Rica. And the intention was to go there to listen to the people from Latin America, particularly young people, particularly women, particularly people from originary cultures, from indigenous people. And one strong message that they gave to us is, look, you Europeans, you are thinking about how to avoid collapse in the future, because many of us Europeans, we still still think that we don't live in collapse, you know, that collapse has not yet happened. And they say, but we Latin Americans, we live in collapse. And what we can learn from these, you know, leading edge of living with collapse. So that's the reality for many millions, probably billions of people around the world. And at the same time, this other world, which is the world of the institutions, the academic and research institutions that we are trying to move, you know, and where we are trying to introduce change in, or to create the conditions for change to happen by provoking them with questions about what is the role now of research for society. So there is a significant tension, and I'm wondering how you see that. Maybe, by the way, Anne Sneaker just made a comment. Anne, would you like to to say something and to ask something, to make a comment. I see our attendees feel quite shy because they are not raising their hands.
There is Maria that raised the hand, I think.
Sorry. Marie Dautzenberg. Yes, Marie, go ahead, please. You are on mute for now.
We cannot hear.
Oh, is it okay now?
Now it is.
Okay, well, I'm really glad to be here. I come for Carlos and all the communities because I know each year it's a great moment of sharing. So I just wanted to share, I try to understand all what you've said. I'm not a researcher, I'm just a citizen. And I like this sentence of Leonard Bernstein, who is the composer, who said that the best way to learn or to answer a question is from another discipline. And I just want to introduce what I feel now, and I will tell you why, that the best way to regenerate research is from outside research or outside researchers. I mean, many times we have researchers going to see citizens and decide they do community-based research. But I think it's even more powerful when the citizens go and meet the researchers in their own institution and ask them why they're doing what they're doing, why they're doing it this way, why do they still support to be ranked like this, why do they support these timings for research. And I think academic research will not achieve a big shift if they don't have more citizens to knock at the door and to ask these questions. This is my first, the first intention I want to share. Maybe I stop here and I can ask other questions afterwards.
No, but please go ahead, because I think nobody would disagree with what you just said. It's very much in the, and it's not necessarily you interrogating the panelists.
Okay.
It's a dialogue. So please,
yes.
If you have other questions.
Okay. Another thing is even if we try to work academic and non-academic research, I think we won't go a step forward if we don't change the a big work on the position or in French we say posture. We all have, and I think what could build bridges between all of us would be maybe humility, the link to the earth, to humus. I mean, sometimes when we are citizens and we go and meet researchers, sometimes they're happy because now it's why the big institution asks that research for and with the society. So also they know not that we get funds from for this. But I think what we all maybe could share is ask what it would mean today to be to be humble as a searcher today regarding non-academic research. That would be interesting. I don't know if I'm clear about that. I mean, that's another question. And I would add one other thing, which is hurt and love. Because many times we talk about curiosity, but what I've seen in some things we organize here in Saint-Malo in France, that love between people is the most powerful way to search together. And it starts with trust. It is things I wanted to share with you here from Brittany.
Many thanks from being in front of the ocean, right?
Yes.
And if I remember well, also from sailing.
Yeah.
So being in direct contact with the ocean. It's interesting. Many thanks for your comments. It's interesting. I was thinking while you were saying this, I was thinking that one feels almost uncomfortable when mentioning love in a session on research, you know, because it looks like officially they do not pertain to the same domain. But I fully agree with you. I mean, if without love, there would be, of course, no research. Let's hear some other people who have raised their hands, and maybe then we can also ask the panelists if they would like to add something or comment. So Madeleine Servan, please. The floor
Thank
is
you very
yours.
much. Thank you very much, Carlos Alvarez Pereira. I'm really very grateful, and what a lucky person I am to be here with you today. I'm grateful for that. Coming from the country of Mircea Malița, I have immediately to say that if limits to growth, it was a bestseller. There are no limits to learning. It's another one that you are just referring, each of you here, and I think that's the key point, the learning. And now the point is, what kind of learning? So my favorite kind of learning, if I have one, out of the many that we specialists in the education, we are very, I would say, rich in giving names to all methods and techniques. It is a transformative learning. No, I mean, learning for what? I mean, it's learning for the fun. It's one way of going ahead, but the learning for transformation, for transformative purposes, that makes a difference. And of course, I'm paying tribute to Jacques Messier, that in what he started naming by the transformative learning. So it's time for individuals to learn, as it is as well the time for institutions to learn, because we are creating these, I would say, institutions, as has been already said. I'm very much agreeing that at a certain time, a certain moment in time, it is good to analyze if they are really capable to follow, or even better, to be the ones that are in advance of the transformation. So that's why when we are saying as well, here is another point that I would like to make. When we are referring to the community-driven research, I think that I will suggest, and I'm looking for your comments, yes, a community that has a vision, because otherwise the risk is to remain in the same logic of difficulties, of problems, unless you do not know which directions do you want to take. So learning to build a vision and then to find solutions for that long-term, maybe process that is in need of. And my last point that I'm really trying to put on the table, it's about yes to research, not to the academic research that is mirroring the discipline organized ways of doing it. I'm very favorable and only favorable to the transdisciplinary approach, to the concepts, to the map of concepts to go ahead, but only with research results, we are not going to change the world. We will need the reflexive practitioners. And here is where I'm going back, closing the loop, in by saying in the institutions that we are looking for the bridging, we need practitioners. So then how are we going to change the school that is capable to give us the transdisciplinary perspective of the world, to give us the chance of having the elephant in the room? I mean, the black swan that is capable, as Taleb said, no? I mean, to change on long term, and how we are going to have those practitioners, reflexive practitioners that are capable to go beyond the bureaucracy. So that's my contribution, and I thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Each of your questions and the comments by the panelists would need another session in itself, you know. And so, as I said, we are recording this session, and we share the recording because this is another one in a probably endless journey of learning together and asking good questions together. We have a couple of hands, also three. I'm not sure we will have time for all of them, because then we will want to go to the bridges presentation. But I have Juliana Juliana Gevich on the list of hands raised. Juliana.
Carlos, if you want to ask one of the others, since I will be saying a few words for the bridges, I'm happy to pass back my time. So
thank you for the generosity.
In the chat, yes.
Juliana, okay, great. So Christoph Pink. Christoph.
Yeah, hi everyone. For a lot of food for thought. It's not my daily input, to put it that way, but I joined for the curiosity. And that's sort of like a word that I'm sort of a little bit stuck with, and maybe missing a little bit, the word of curiosity. I mean, we talk about dreaming, we talk about learning, and I think a lot of these things, and maybe one of my gripes with research institutions, I'm not a researcher myself, but I work a lot with researchers in technical fields, is they always want to find the solution of the problem. And they always start with, what is the problem? And they're quite often unwilling to define the problem unless they know they can find the solution within their field of expertise. So that's sort of the willingness to expose ourselves to learn something that we actually do not know anything about. So pretty steep learning curve, of course. I think that curiosity is somewhat missing, and the playfulness. It's all very, yes, I know we're discussing a lot of very serious things, but maybe the solution is to sort of take some of that stress out of it and actually really start to get out of the silo, basically. I mean, the research institutions quite often are in my experience, at least from work, the most heavily siloed institutions that I find. So yeah, it's just a little bit of a thought on the curiosity and creativity, basically. I think, Anna, you touched on that already, but I think creativity really mustn't be undervalued in if we want to be a learning society.
Many very deep comments, Christophe. I loved what you said, that in general we don't define the problems until we know that we have the solutions. So this is tricky, right? Because that means that we are framing questions and relevant questions only in as much we have already the responses. And instead of problems and solutions, I used to talk about questions and responses. Yeah. And to quote another humanist, Rilke, the poet, who said, "Don't run for the responses, leave the questions. Leave the questions until you will realize that at some point, maybe without even noticing it, you will have started leaving the responses." So it's a different kind of process in which, for sure, curiosity and creativity are most relevant. And the call for, we used to be humans, we used to be explorers, right? I mean, it's by exploring that we populated the earth, and exploring places. I mean, imagine of how peoples from hundreds of thousands of years ago were able to explore, with no technologies in the sense we understand the word technology today. So many thanks. Just one last question or comment by the audience, and before we get back to the panelists and to in particular to Stephen. Nepeti Nicanor, you raise your hand.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the wonderful presentation. Sorry, I missed some of it because I was in and out due to power problems here in South Africa. Anyway, I've got a few. I'm just going to be a bit of a devil's advocate, building on to Louise Westerbeck's discussion. As somebody from the global south in Africa, okay. I mean, I've worked a lot on environment and ecosystems for many years before. And like he said, all of a sudden we are now focusing on climate, okay? For someone from the global south who was living We have communities be destroyed by mines. We are still talking about, no one is having a discussion with us about what does renewable energy mean to us? Where are all these inputs going to come from? They're going to destroy more and more of where we live. And people are talking about 1 degree Celsius. Guys, we have serious problems. So when we go to also on the issue of the institutions, when we talk about research, who are these researchers? Is it universities? Is it the international organization? Is it NGOs? As far as I'm concerned, this whole sustainability research is already hijacked. It's hijacked by the financial sector. Now you have all these consulting firms ranking organizations. They have never been in environment. They don't have a clue, but it's all about money. That agenda has been hijacked already. We have now consulting firms who are doing that work around that. Also, who funds the research determines the agenda, right? So most of the NGOs in Africa, for instance, they're just doing what whoever has the money says needs to be researched. We came from community-based ecology and ecological management. Now we are in climate change, like he said. Really, where do we fit? What does a person in a community, what do you go and tell a person in a village? Oh, you are worried about temperature, about 1 degree Celsius, when they have serious environmental and sociological problems that have come because of this whole agenda. And we are also not saying there's this solution, but we are not talking about what will be the impact of this new agenda on communities, especially the ones who are not at the table. And the question is that the other issue is about power and values. Whose values are being researched on which, I mean, as we know, research is from the researcher's value perspective and your perspective. You bring where you come from into the research table. So when we are talking about renewable energy, whose values are we proposing? If the majority of the people are not at the table. Right now, for the past 3 years, I'm sure everyone is concerned about even the legitimacy and the trust in institutions, even the UN. Your reputation as the UN is at stake. Because people are asking, where is all, if the UN works on marginalized people, where are all your headquarters? Where are your people? You are spending most of the time flying to countries to solve problems. So those are really the issues that we also need to discuss about the research agenda. Universities are also not friendly to society, to communities, because that is a culture also. That it needs to be, we are knowledge producers, we are better than the community. And how do we break that? So basically, I just wanted to be a bit of a devil's advocate, but those issues are important for some of us in the global south. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nepeti. You are not, I mean, as far as we are concerned in the Club of Rome, you were not playing the devil's advocate. I fully agree with what you said, and thank you for bringing to the table the power issue. So when we talk about reframing the role of science for society, we're also talking about that. We're also talking about putting the science research and institutions at the service of people and at the service of people where they are. And they are, by the way, in what I call most of the world, you know, what was called in geopolitics in not so long ago, there was this expression of rest of the world. And that rest of the world has always been, and even more today, most of the world. So putting the perspectives and the needs and the challenges that most of the world is living at the center of the agenda. So maybe we are crazy in thinking that we could go to the, in particular to the funding agencies to say, hey, look, we have really to put this upside down. I use often the expression putting upside down, which means also changing dramatically the way things are funded. You know, what is funded and for what purpose, and how could we reframe that? That's also very much a goal we have, and that in the Club of Rome, but also with our friends and partners of the Bridges Coalition. I'm aware of time, so maybe let's shift now to the presentation of the Bridges Coalition and a brief presentation by some of the hubs present in the Bridges Coalition. Stephen, are you ready for that?
Sure. Yeah, I am. And I think that one of the things that I'm going to do to begin with is try to share my screen. I hope I have the privilege to do that here. Let's see. I'll try this now. I want to simply point out, can you see my screen or not?
We do see your screen, yes.
Yeah, okay. So what I wanted to I was going to give some background on Bridges. What I will say very briefly is that Bridges was formed over a visioning process that came out of a UNESCO project called Broadening the Application of the Sustainability Science Approach.
Stephen, we can see your notes. We can see it's on presenter mode. You need to.
Oh, yeah, I don't know how to take it off that because that seems to be only my.
Click those three little dots. No, go back. The three little dots give you I think.
Which, these ones here?
Yeah, it should, yeah.
Go into what, screen, what?
Oh, no, it doesn't.
It's a little different in, well, anyway, it's not so important. I simply wanted to flash this up here to say that there were some things I was going to tell about the background of Bridges and the construction of Bridges that I'm much more interested in letting the hubs actually give their short interventions, 2 minutes each or so, 2-3 minutes top from each hub, so that they can say what the hubs are doing. The one thing I want to say, though, before I do turn it over to those short interventions, is just to say that Bridges did come out of this project. I flashed that up there before so that you could see, and I think it's easier if I do it this way. Maybe I can go on my other screen. I don't know if that shows up better now.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that's the Bridges URL for the Bridges website, which is launching, and we had originally hoped it could be launched by this festival, but that didn't work out. We're still populating it. So in the next couple of weeks, this is launching. And that's going to provide a wealth of information about Bridges, about its history, about its current reach and constitution, who's involved in it, and how you get involved with it as an individual, as an organization, and what have you. So I simply wanted to point that out because I'm not going to get into all those things right now, other than to say that Bridges came out of a previous UNESCO project that was started around the same time that the Paris Agreement was formalized, that the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs were formalized. And the idea was to take a look at the state of sustainability science as a field. And sorry, I see I'm still sharing. And then make a series of recommendations about how sustainability science could better help UN or UNESCO member states realize their obligations under the Paris Agreement, under other international intergovernmental agreements. And part of that process opened the door in a way it hadn't really been opened before to the humanities, to the arts, to qualitative social sciences, to indigenous knowledge systems, to other local and traditional knowledge systems. And Bridges was an effort to sort of try to build from the bottom up partly, but also transversely across knowledge domains, structures that could help better integrate some of these previously more marginalized communities of practice and communities of knowledge into better integration with the sustainability science community and the sustainability education community and the movement from knowledge production into applied knowledge in action, climate and biodiversity action, and other kinds of necessary social ecological initiatives. So that being said, now that I've shared the URL for the Bridges website, you can go there for much more information. And what I'd like to do now is just mention that the founding partners of Bridges were about 40 organizations, very dissimilar organizations, everything from institutions to NGOs to one indigenous community, the Kogi, to small foundations and trusts to large organizations like the International Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences, like the ISC, Future Earth, and so forth. Some of these are key partners, and some of them are member organizations of the Bridges Coalition. The Bridges Coalition will be taking new members on, and especially in those parts of the world where we need to have stronger engagement and stronger partnership in the global South, in Asia, in other parts of Africa. We have a anchoring right now in South Africa, in South America, in small island developing states. We do have the will and the interest to really be developing the Bridges Coalition more in these places where we have some involvement, but not enough. So I'll say that much right now. We have 5 hubs that now anchor Bridges that are hosted by different institutions and organizations, and the Club of Rome hosts one of them. We've heard a little bit from the Club of Rome today, so I'd like to give the other 4 hubs an opportunity to say what their profiles are, and I think we'll begin with the University of Pretoria. We have a short film from them.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello everyone, this is Tafazwa Mshonga from the University of Pretoria. So the African Hub is hosted by the Center for the Advancement of Scholarship here at the University of Pretoria. The center itself was already established as a multidisciplinary research entity with the intention to host projects that promote and emphasize transdisciplinary and multidisciplinary inquiry on areas that are of social, economic, and environmental importance. So within the Bridges project, we are focusing on sustainability science. We're currently hosting about 7 projects that cover a broad range of topics in the areas of agriculture and food security, human and digital economy, African urbanism, and environmental.
Oh, something happened to the file.
I'm not quite sure what happened there, but maybe if we
started just.
It's a connectivity issue.
Well, I think the file though is with Rod and Lolita. So are we going to try to see the rest of it, or? Should I move to another intervention while we try to sort that out?
Yes, yes,
okay.
Please.
Yeah, I'd like to invite Lucy Atala, the director of the UK hub of Bridges at the University of Wales, Trinity St. David, to tell us a little about their hub.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to go a bit rogue, Stephen. And I'm not going to say that much about the hub, but I suppose tangentially I kind of am. So what I'm going to talk about is whether knowing that everything is connected is relevant to research today. And I think that's relevant to the situations that we've been talking about so far. So since time began, uncertainty has been a condition of existence. And people everywhere have manufactured mechanisms to cope with it, from prayer and ritual to laws and insurance policies. Humanity has always possessed a raft of processes that they hope to deal with the unexpected. Even education can be seen as a route to a secure future, where humanity can overcome the forces and events of this complicated world. But despite any of these magnificent developments, medicine, technology, for example, uncertainty continues to rule. And the forces of the world are actually more powerful, or presented as more powerful than ever, almost stronger, seemingly poised to destroy us. In seeking certainty, deeper uncertainty, and the very future we all feared is emerging. So why is this? Is the root of the problem carbon emissions, plastics, or is it something else? Let's remember, most people would agree now, all those system thinkers and so on, that everything is unequivocally physically connected. Every entity, material, substance, creature held within a vast pattern of tangible chemical relationships that create this shared existence. A change anywhere changes everywhere. This is not about intersections. Water doesn't appear as hydrogen and oxygen, but is a new thing made when they relate. So despite the illusion of distance or disconnection between things, everything exists and acts relationally. In simple terms, I am because carbon is. More or less carbon equals a different me, and vice versa. So the powerful materials that are hoping to stand poised to destroy us come from this human exceptionalist picture that continues to imagine reality as carbons and chemical as separate, that humans and carbon and other chemicals are separate. Humans and carbon and other sets of chemicals are in relationship with the world. They are the world, worlding. We are doing this with the chemicals together, which means self-interest is essentially self-harm. Using a them and us narrative is the root of the problem, as far as I can see. And this is what needs to be taught to support people to see how they are, in fact, the soil, the water, the air. And then we can work to design our shared existence from that point of reference. So that is what Bridges, for me, is about. That's how Bridges might work when we bridge these knowledges in this way. I hope I didn't use up too much time, and I'm sorry I went rogue.
That's okay. That's okay.
Thank you, Lucy. Very, very inspiring. Thank you so much. Go ahead, please, Stephen.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to invite Tom McGovern from the City University of New York Princeton Joint Organized Hub to tell us a little bit about their hub.
Great. And if I can share screen, I will, in fact, PowerPoint you, but very briefly.
You use PowerPoint as a verb.
Okay, so we are a joint hub. We're a partnership between Princeton University and City University of New York, and more specifically, we are a partnership between Princeton's Climate Change and History Research Initiative and NABO, North Atlantic Biocultural Organization in CUNY. NABO has been around since 1992. CCHRI has been around for about 5 years now. We are allies because we're both interested in trying to contribute to linking the long-term to current sustainable development goal efforts. So we're trying to mobilize the past to serve the present and the future. Our colleagues CCHRI are predominantly historians, but they are branching out very rapidly in other areas. In NABO, we are archaeologists, paleoecologists, educators. We're all about field schools, collaboration with local communities. As you can see, there's a book out, which I recommend you all have a look at, and it's free, open access. So again, the question is, what sort of past does the future need? Is a question which we're trying to address. Okay, very quickly, one of the areas where we have been successful in getting connection between humans and human knowledge and the past and the future is in maritime historical ecology. The Northfish Project, followed now by the Four Oceans Project, led by Paul Holm, has been mobilizing all the records of the past, the written records, people's accounts, and the archaeology to get us an idea of what was the ocean like just a few centuries ago, and to help us get around the problem of shifting baselines, which are preventing us from understanding how to best achieve a sustainable future. So we're very much at sea, and we're trying to be creative there. However, we also have the problem that climate change affects our record as well. What you're looking at here is a whole mass of fish bones weathering out for site in Iceland, being revealed and also being destroyed. So just as we can do wonderful things with our data, which we could not do a few years ago, ancient DNA stable isotopes, we can trace the lives of individual codfish who died 1,000 years ago. We do all this magic now, but we're losing our basic data. It is being destroyed very rapidly. So this is a crisis for us. In the next 10 years, probably 80% of the coastal archaeology in circumpolar north will be destroyed forever. Think about that. Okay, we have thought about that. So one of the things we're trying to do is to mobilize local communities to help them become full participants in the rescue of their own heritage and of this globally important scientific knowledge. So we have sponsoring field schools. We are still doing this. This example, one of them, which was quite successful pre-COVID in South Greenland, and we'll be doing another one of those as soon as we can. We have ongoing field schools in the Orkney Islands, and we will do them in the US as well. So that is us. We're about long-term. We're about the oceans. We're about the past. We're also very much about the present, about mobilizing communities, providing them with tools, connecting them together so they're in touch with each other to save the planet together. That is us.
Okay. Okay, I'll introduce, just before I introduce Juliana, I want to mention that in the chat window, Catherine Brown very helpfully put a link in there, which takes us to the feature that just went up on the Learning Planet website. And I point this out only to give you a sense that in addition to this session that we're very grateful that our partners at Club of Rome have organized about bridges, we actually have 6 more sessions happening this week. And so if you go onto the Learning Planet website news under features, you're going to see all of them listed there. I'm not going to go through them right now. But again, there's 6 more after this between now and Friday, and we hope you'll check them out. There's a great variety of different workshops emphasizing different learning dimensions of projects and cooperations and institutes and organizations that are linked into the Bridges Coalition. I'd like to now invite, and some of whom we've heard from some of these people today. I'd like to invite Juliana Gavich, please, to tell us about the flagship hub at Arizona State University.
Thanks, Stephen. Greetings, everyone. It's an honor to learn with and from you all today. My name is Juliana Gavich, and I'm the Capacity Building and Engagement Lead and Program Manager for the Bridges Coalition and its flagship hub, which is based at Arizona State University in the USA. Today, I'm here to share a bit about the Bridges flagship hub on behalf of its director, Joni Adamson, who unfortunately was not able to join us. The Bridges flagship hub at ASU advocates and creates space for the meaningful engagement of traditionally marginalized voices and perspectives in justice-driven sustainability education. It does this by supporting humanities-led educational and action-oriented programs and initiatives, and by leveraging the collective wisdom and strengths of humans and nature. An important responsibility of the flagship hub is to play a leading operational and implementation role amongst the Bridges global hubs in supporting the distributed Secretariat of Bridges. Beyond this, though, the Bridges flagship hub also bears its own unique identity and purpose. It's hosted within the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory at ASU. The flagship hub builds on its own strong foundations and championing the advancement of environmental humanities and sustainability science and education at ASU and beyond. And with that, one of its early adopted signature programs is its Bridges Labs, which is adapted from and created in collaboration with the Humanities Labs at ASU. These are experiential learning courses that aim to leverage the humanities, or more broadly, what they're referring to as human sciences, to get beneath the surface of our world's most pressing social and environmental problems. Examples of the kind of topics that have or will be addressed in these early Bridges Labs include a gendered approach to peace, security, and climate justice, approaches to just energy transitions, and what do we even mean by just transitions, and an exploration of ocean futures. Lastly, I'd like to highlight a signature program, which I'm referring to as part of the Capacity Building and Engagement Initiative for Bridges, which I designed and co-lead on behalf of the larger coalition. This is the Bridging Communities Cafe series, which seeks to foster understanding across difference, build community, and nurture pathways for strengthening and enacting our collective capacities. To date, we've held 3 cafes in the first half of what we're calling our inaugural season 1, but we're also gearing up for the second half as we speak. And though this program is not housed within any specific Bridges hub, I do want to acknowledge the wonderful support of the flagship hub team and those from the University of Wales Trinity St. David hub for your collaboration so far as co-hosts in this early phase. And I look forward to building on those and the tremendous energy from this global community, engaging the other Bridges hubs, as well as other members and partners that are starting to join this Bridges community as co-organizers and co-hosts in future monthly cafes. In closing, I'd just like to say on my own behalf that Like Bridges as a whole, each of the global hubs are still in their early, though varied phases of development. And as a capacity building engagement lead, I really look forward to working across these hubs and with our global partners to help catalyze and expand the reach of Bridges' co-creative research, learning, and action initiatives in the months and years to come. And I'll post some information on some of the things I mentioned in the chats, as well as some contact information for those who are interested in reaching out. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Carlos, for hosting this fantastic event, and to your whole team.
Thank you, Juliana. Thank you, Stephen. I mean, we are running out of time as usual, you know, but I would, before saying a few words at the end, I would like to invite Michel Spiro to share some insights. Just a couple of minutes. Michel, as I said at the beginning, you know, we in the Club of Rome have always been at the intersection of humanism and science. Sometimes I reduce this to humanism and thermodynamics, but it's a bit too reductionistic. It's a bit unfair to other natural sciences. Michel is the president of the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics, and he's also the chair of the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development. It's basic science meaning mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology. And we are collaborating, the Club of Rome is collaborating with that international year. We co-organized a world conference on that topic in Belgrade in September. So happy to have you with us, Michel, and to say a couple of things, not much, sorry, not much time.
Fine. Thank you, Carlos, for inviting me to say a few words on behalf of this international year. So the International Year of Basic Sciences, I would define basic sciences as curiosity-driven sciences. This is wider than what you said, Carlos, because also humanities, and we heard about that, can be curiosity-driven. So basic for me, the meaning is curiosity-driven sciences. So basic sciences for sustainable development, what we call the IYBSSD. This international year has been proclaimed, you mentioned that at the very beginning, by the United Nations General Assembly on December 2nd, 2021. The international year is supported by more than 50 scientific unions and organizations, 110 academies and networks of scientists, 31 Nobel laureates or field medalists. So this is a real asset. The opening ceremony took place at UNESCO on July 8th, 2022 in Paris, and the closing ceremony will happen at CERN in Geneva on October 6th. So it spanned over 2 years. It was July 8th, 2022, and the closing on October 6th, 2023. Meanwhile, hundreds of events are happening, and this event, I consider it as one of the events of the International Year, insisting on how much basic sciences and sciences in general are essential to achieve sustainability. One particular IYBSSD event should occur during one session of the United Nations General Assembly, end of May 2023. This IYBSSD UN event could be an opportunity to express our support to the idea of a decade of sciences, not only basic, of sciences for sustainability. The rationale behind it would be to increase the mobilization of sciences for sustainability, to educate in and advertise co-constructed sustainability science, to define a roadmap beyond 2030 for sciences for sustainability and for co-constructed sustainability science, and to find and implement concretely the vision and organization we may want for sustainability science and sciences for sustainability. This could happen a little bit in the spirit of which presided to the creation of the CERN International Organization after the Second World War. I think you would agree that the sustainability science and the sciences for sustainability are somewhat too much fragmented. You know that all the goals are interconnected, too much fragmented thematically and geographically, and that there is room for an improved approach and efficiency. Obviously, for this, a close link must be established with what already exists, like you, the Bridges Sustainability Science Coalition, like the ideas developed by the Club of Rome or by the International Science Council. They have a document unleashing science delivering missions for sustainability, and also the ideas developed by many, many others. This could be, that way, a decade of co-construction of sustainability science. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Michel. So we're out of time. I will just take 2 minutes, abusing of your time to close this session, to say thank you to everybody. It was really exciting to have all of you on board. We didn't solve any problem. We didn't properly answer any question, but I think we asked better questions and we created a little bit more of collective energy and collective commitment to address fundamental questions from a high diversity of perspectives, which is very much the role of the Club of Rome. I mentioned humanism and science as sources of inspiration, science in the sense of natural sciences, but the Club of Rome is built on many threads, on weaving many threads together. Also, especially from the perspective of the fifth element program, we are looking at the experiences of many communities on the grounds and from many different cultures, different worldviews. One of our co-presidents is Mampela Rampele, who, when she was in her 20s, created the Black Consciousness Movement in South Africa, inspired by the pedagogies of liberation, what I call, the idea of the worst jails that we have are the mental ones, but we can liberate from them, and inspired, of course, by African worldviews. So for instance, in the context of this LearningPleanet Festival, we will celebrate this Friday. You can look also for the information on that. This Friday, 27 at 10 a.m. CET, an Ubuntu Learning Circle session. We created with the LearningPleanet Institute this Ubuntu Learning Circle, and that one will be devoted to the concept of African youth reinventing the future. What if actually we have to come back to our mother continent, but from the perspective of younger generations, to imagine, to dream, to use the words of Maria Clara and Anna, to dream other futures for themselves, for the Africans, for Africa by Africans, but also, to be honest, most probably for the rest of humanity. Maybe we have to come back to the origins and learn from Africa. So thank you to everybody. You have the information in the chat right now put by Nolita and Catherine. Thank you on this session on Friday. I just have to thank all of you for being here, for participating in whatever way you did. I think it was a very exciting exchange. I think we succeeded in having this as a dialogue, as an opening the space of possibilities. So let's dream, let's continue dreaming together, because out of dreams comes learning and life. That's also what we learned today. Thank you so much, and have a good evening or whatever in the place where you are.
Thank you,
Carlos.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Very inspiring. Thanks.
Thank you.